an alibi.
Ooh, it talks.
Oh, this is like it talks to you. So this is like the release. You guys are signing a release right now. I'm
Yeah,
so
pretty
sorry.
much. Yeah.
So yeah, that would be, oh, maybe that's the next book, right? This is your alibi. You're like on a Zoom. You do the murder. I was on the Zoom.
There's proof of it.
I love this.
It's funny.
Yeah, if you're gonna go, I don't know, if you're gonna go do the murder, this is great. I will say you were here.
We can vouch. We have proof.
Also, I know there might be some non-Jersey readers here, but they are the best. They're the best. they're the best and my most favorite. If you are a Jersey reader, don't tell anyone else. I don't want to offend anyone.
I think it's probably mostly Jersey people, if I had to guess. But I guess we'll go ahead and just explain who we are and what we're doing here. And by the time we're actually talking about real stuff, maybe we'll have some more people with us, or we won't. And this will be a lovely group either way. So anyway, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kerri Sullivan. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jersey Collective. I am the founder of that project, which has been going since 2014, primarily as an Instagram account where a different person takes over every week and kind of shares their perspective of New Jersey for the followers. But I've always kind of found excuses to use it as my vehicle to like do Jersey stuff in other ways. And so this is my latest attempt at that. I'm a public librarian by day and a writer. So obviously books are something I enjoy, and there's a lot of great Jersey books out there. And I thought it would be fun to have a vehicle to talk about them. And yeah, so that's me. And then so I invited Courtney to be part of this with me as well. So if you want to introduce yourself, Courtney, I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Preiss. I am really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to do this with you, Kerri. Yeah, I am a creative director by day and writer by all hours of the night and weekend. I recently sold my debut novel to Penguin Random House, and it is also a New Jersey book. So I just have like a special heart for Jersey-centric literature, I guess. My book is called Welcome Home, Caroline Klein, and it'll be out next spring. Yeah, I'm from Monmouth County originally. After a long foray in different cities, most recently a decade in Brooklyn, I now live in Asbury Park. So yeah, we're back. Monmouth County vibes forever.
And congratulations. I want that galley yesterday. I know it doesn't exist yet.
As soon as it's in readable shape, it will be in your mailbox, I promise.
Yeah, we can't wait. But yeah, so tonight we have Katie Runde with us, who is the author of The Shore. And I'll just let you introduce yourself as well, because that's what we've been doing, and you'll do a better job at it than we will. So go ahead and tell everyone who you are and about your book.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited to be the first book for your book club. I think first of many really fun clubs that you're going to have, and great turnout, because it really is true. When you get into it, there are so many beautiful Jersey books. So yeah, I'm Katie Runde. I wrote The Shore, came out last May. I'm originally from the Jersey Shore. The town I grew up in is Seaside Park. And I grew up, my family ran boardwalk businesses. So we had kind of a little bit of everything, like wheel games. We had a snack bar called Marty's Doghouse. We had parking lots. We had an umbrella rental. I like to joke that the only business we didn't have is the one in the book. We did not do beach, like we did not do vacation rentals at all. So that's totally fictional. And yeah, so I fell in love with a Midwesterner. We also moved around quite a bit. We did an LA stint and a New York stint, and he's originally from Iowa. And so his job and family brought us here. So we now live in Iowa City, which is a great place for a writer. The Iowa Writers Workshop is here, and it kind of punches above its weight as far as literary scene goes. You can kind of show up at a reading any night of the week. And and I think especially now, it's taken a little while. There's a really good community of writers here that are not affiliated with the Writers Workshop. And so that's like kind of taken hold in the last few years, has been really fun. And I have my professional background besides writing is in teaching, high school level, Spanish and English. But I was saying before everyone was on the Zoom, my original plan was to go back from being a stay-at-home mom to that in 2020, but like, to any plan in 2020. And so I have two girls, and one is almost 9 and 7. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I thought maybe we'd warm up with some like Jersey questions before we get into some more of the book stuff.
Let's do it. And should we give a heads up about, you can put questions in the chat, or we'll open it up at the end.
Good call. Yeah, so right now I have it set that people attending are not able to unmute themselves, but you are able to type stuff in the chat if you want as we go through, and then later at the end I'll let you unmute yourself and ask questions, but I just didn't want to do that during the meeting to avoid interruptions. But yeah, so I mean, we'll talk about the book, we'll talk about writing, we'll talk about New Jersey. If you've read the book, we can get into it. If you haven't read the book, I think you'll leave here wanting to read the book.
Yeah, and I don't think we have, and I don't think it's probably a mixed crowd of read or haven't read, and I truly don't think it's like a spoilable book, like know where it's going, kind of, so if there's anything that pops up that's like a red flag spoiler, I'll try to go around it, but I don't think you have to be too careful. I don't think it will take away from
I think you're right. Yeah. Okay, well, I know Courtney wrote some great questions. Courtney, do you want to pick some of your New Jersey questions to start with?
We can definitely, the New Jersey questions they get like progressively more goofy. So we'll start at like the lower goof end of the spectrum and we'll ascend. Okay, I have all my questions pulled up on the side. So I'm curious about some of your favorite writers from New Jersey. If you have favorite books that are about Jersey or take place here. And I'm also curious, you were talking a little bit about this maybe before we hit record, but if there's sort of any books in conversation with the shore, you had mentioned that you feel like Crying in H Mart to some extent, a lot of the themes that Michelle Zauner hits on there kind of carry over to the shore. So any of those kind of like spiritual sibling books as well for fans of this book who are looking to read something maybe similar in some way.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That is a fantastic place to start. My heart and my just like childhood, I would start with Judy Blume. The 25th anniversary of Summer Sisters is coming up, and I'm just itching. I'm sure I will not be the only person marking that occasion, but I'm itching to mark it myself with her redefinition of the beach read, right? Like, that book it's epic. It covers so much time. It does so much. I remember like it was like the book of the summer 25 years ago. So I was 15 then. So I was 15, just the perfect time for that book to come out. And she has this way, I think, of, and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Obviously, like, you remember where you were when you read it. You remember that feeling, like that book evoked the feeling of like, holy, whatever. Can I maybe
you can swear, that's fine.
I was gonna ask the same question.
I know.
Okay, great.
I say cuss now. I've been in the Midwest so long, right? It should be curse if you're from New Jersey. But it was that feeling of, I can do this, you can write this. It was just so honest, like really has that life-changing feeling. I got some pictures at the rest area when I was visiting my mom over the summer. She has a rest area named after her now. And she's just the original. And then I'm going to jump to a writer who debuted the same month as me. To finish up with my thoughts on Judy Blume, I think she also gets that, like, she gets that vibe of like where Jersey is situated, right? There's this like glamour to like, when Margaret goes to the city with her grandma and has these like really glamorous days. And then also that like you might go to camp, you might go to the shore, right? The geography of it and like where you go from there. I think she does so well. So yeah, so to jump to my same debut month, I have to shout out a writer named Bud Smith, who's super active in the writing community in New Jersey. And his Big Five debut came out in May. We were supposed to actually have the same exact debut day. Mine got pushed back a couple of weeks. I have his book. I'll show the cover while I'm talking about it. Where are you? He's here. I'm just not seeing it. Well, I'll find it later. But anyway, his book is called Teenager, and it starts out in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, and then it becomes this just like cross-country journey. It's these teenagers in love. It starts out with, I don't even want to spoil what it starts out with, but like they're being chased like throughout the United States. And it just has this, like, I describe it as having the feeling of like the lyrics from Greetings from Asbury Park, which also just had a big anniversary. I think it was like 40th anniversary of that album. It's just like this free association, just beauty, but propulsive. I could not put it down. And Bud and I were in the same high school class. We went to Central Regional in Bayville, New Jersey. He's from Bayville, and then they sent the shore kids from like a couple towns like inland to that school. So that's where I went to high school. And so we had like a couple classes together and then had this debut. So I have to shout him out. So cool. I could go on and on. I have if you want my deep dive on just Jersey Shore books, I have a LitHub listicle about it there that are like specific to Jersey Shore. But then as far as like books that speak to the shore, I think two that I always connect that were like light bulb moments. The first one's called We Are Not Ourselves by Matthew Thomas. That is a story of a man who had early onset dementia. It's an Irish Catholic family. And it's so beautiful. And it changed the way that I thought a story like that could be told. It's all from the wife's perspective. It covers a ton of time and just tells the story with like such compassion and beauty. It's incredible. It came out a few years ago, and it was a big book when it came out, and I really hope he's working on something else. I think that he's a teacher for his day job, so that might take a little bit longer. But that is beautiful. If you're looking for a book about a person who's, you have to care for, who's not themselves. And then I also, it's really interesting to mention these two books in the same breath, but I always do. The other book that just kicked me in the butt and was like, you have to write your version of this. You can do this with humor. You can do it in any form you want, was Goodbye Vitamin by Rachel Kong. She has another book coming out in the spring too, which I'm very excited about. And so that's also the story of a woman who's 30. She goes back to her home in Orange County, California, and her dad is going through some dementia. And the interesting part of that is it's told as like an epistolary book. It's very skinny, but just packs this huge punch. And I think it does two things. It uses humor, it uses that form really well, and it shows the place as so important, right? Besides like the reality show, I really did not give Orange County a second thought until I read that book, but she places it there really well. And she also shows how the different members of the family react and have totally different experiences. Like, so the dad was not perfect. He had a drinking problem and had some affairs and like before he got sick. So she presents this like different version of things for her brother and for her and for the rest of the family. And it's fantastic. So I could go on all day, but I think that's a good cross section.
Nice. I made a note to myself about your literary hub list. So I'll definitely include that in our next like email kind of recapping this with a video and
fantastic. Yeah.
People want to find
There's some great books. There's some great books on that list, including a shark attack book that really surprised. I am not to shore. Yes, I was like, I gotta throw some nonfiction on here. And then I read it and I was like riveted and horrified. I loved it.
I have that sitting downstairs. I haven't gotten to it yet, but one day.
Yeah, I was surprised I was trying to just like mix it up genre wise for a listicle. Like no one's gonna come and be like, you must have a nonfiction book on this listicle. But I spent the better part of like April and May listening to Shark Attack book. I'm very surprised. I recommend it.
That's funny. So I wanted to ask you about your book specifically, just like sort of why you wanted to, obviously you're from New Jersey, so that's, it's what you know, but what was it about setting, why did you want to set this story in New Jersey? Like, you're a writer, you've lived in lots of other places, you could set it anywhere, but what was it about your hometown that made you want to set it there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, one reason is revenge. There was for a couple of reasons, right? I felt like honestly over the years, and especially as I moved away and moved around, you move to a new place and you meet new people and you give your little like, here's who I am, right? At like a bar or, party or something, right? And where are you from? And I felt like as the years went on, right, people either didn't know it at all or had been kind of like, particularly like Seaside Heights, Seaside Park had been really a little bit like misrepresented or just represented in this very narrow way. So people either hadn't heard of it at all or they knew it from the reality show. And I just knew there was so much more to it. It's a really interesting place. That's the other thing I've only figured out when I left, right? Like when you're steeped somewhere and you're waking up there every day and going to work or going to school, you don't know anything else. You don't really know that it's a unique or interesting place. And as I moved around to different cities and met people who grew up in other places, I was like, oh, for example, like when I met my now husband, the first summer we were going home from college, we met in college and it was in the Midwest. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to just go make a bunch of money. I'm going to go work like 80 hours a week, on the boardwalk. And he's like, what? I was like, and I was kind of like making fun of him. I was like, what, aren't you going to get a job? And he's like, well, for me to get a job in Cedar Rapids, I'd have to like lie to the people at Chili's and tell them I'm going to be there forever. I can't just like walk into the Chili's and be like, hi, will you hire me for 8 weeks? And so little things like that started to happen where I realized that little by little, what an interesting place it was. And then one of the other little revenge parts was there's a writer from the New York Times who in 2011 wrote like a travel piece and stopped by Seaside Heights and Seaside Park and literally compared her time there to, she was a reporter who had also been to a war zone. And
No.
it was just like, it was very like dismissive and I hated it. And I was like, you didn't get it. Like, she was in and out. I think it was raining the day she was there too. And she just like, it was kind of a hit piece, and I was like, no, this is not what this place is. So I really wanted to set it there. And then as I was writing too, I really wanted it to I wanted this story of this family to play out against a backdrop that that's like real life, but like hyper real life, so as I've, talked about this book, you talk to anyone who's been through something really hard, particularly like a loss, and they feel weird going out into the world. It feels like weird and fragile, going out into the world, like grocery shopping. And when you set that in the summer in Seaside, it's that times 1,000. So it takes that feeling that like probably everybody at some point in your life will have, and it just explodes it. Like when you put it in a town where everybody's on vacation and it's a super crowded, very intense really only 10 weeks of the year, and you set it then, it just multiplies that feeling exponentially. So those were my big reasons. Like I think revenge is a great reason to do anything. Everyone who's doing their murders while they're on the Zoom, while we think they're on Zoom, understands that.
It's a very nuanced take on revenge, so I really appreciate that. I'm starting to progress into some of the goofier questions. So your epigraph is a line from Bruce Springsteen, I believe from his memoir, Born to Run, which we were talking about great audiobooks. That one is amazing. I of course I have the paper one and the audio, but just shout out to the audiobook. So I'm curious, do you have a favorite Bruce song / album? And how often readers from outside of New Jersey ask you like about Bruce Springsteen? Like, is it the second thing they ask you? Like how quickly does it come up?
That is a fantastic question. And I am so thrilled. This is already everything I ever hoped it would be and more, that the third question is a Springsteen question. But it's Jersey readers do, but shockingly, did you know people not from New Jersey sometimes don't even know that he's from there? My father-in-law, who I have known for 20 years, did not know Bruce Springsteen was from New Jersey. I almost fell over. I was like, who are you?
Where did he think
like,
he
I
was
like it.
from?
And
Levittown? Like,
some people think he's from the Midwest. A lot of people think he's from the Midwest.
Interesting.
I know, and shocking. So it's kind of interesting on that. And I have actually, well, and I'll do a really super fast version of like, this wasn't supposed to be the epigraph. I wanted a line from 4th of July Asbury Park. And long story short, the time when I was trying to get permission for that, my editor didn't even want to try to get permission. And I was like, I do not, my life will be ruined if Bruce Springsteen sues me. My whole life will be ruined. So no, thank you. And I thought it was like unlikely, but like after some research, it was like, me. It's not like the big corporation that would get it. It would be like me if anybody got sued. So long story short, it was the time he was selling his whole catalog. He was selling it for like $500 million. Literally at the times we were trying to email him. Like, can you imagine like this email from like a debut writer coming across somebody's email? That would be like, delete. So it's in the galley. It's in the galley copies. So, I'll have to send you one of those. I got a couple left.
rare.
I think it really depends on like what you're going through and the stage of your life, right? What your favorite is. But recently, particularly because like it was on social media about the anniversary of Greetings from Asbury Park. And that album came out the year my dad would have been like graduating from college. And he worked at a record stand on the boardwalk. So I just loved like thinking of him playing that, that particular summer. And I love thinking of him playing it like before, because like that didn't sell a ton. Like it wasn't like a huge hit. I think it was, and I love him like just feeling like he like was discovering something, like in the 70s. So I've been listening to from that album, I've listened to Growing Up a lot. That's my just like this week favorite. I just think it's like it has that like that whole album has this like unsolved consciousness that like as a writer, I think you only get in the first thing you make,
Wow.
That, like,
yeah.
Obviously all his other albums were incredible and iconic too. But the free association of that whole album it's so weird. It's so weird. Like he puts words together in the album that are like make no sense together, but then they make this wacky image, and I think like I listened to Does This Bus Stop at 82nd Street a lot when I lived in New York and was writing like this as a short story. And when New York was really new to me, and it evoked that sort of same feeling, so at that time that was a favorite. But man, if you could just like inject that unsolved consciousness of those lyrics into my veins, I would be very grateful, it has that just like this real freedom and this just like experimental feeling to it that whenever I read or hear things like that, it just makes you light up, Did I answer
that?
Did I answer did I answer both the questions?
I think you did.
Okay.
I think you did. Yeah.
Well, we got the epigraph because the epigraph is the same publisher. So they're not going to sue themselves. So we're all good. Katie's not going to get sued.
Wow.
That's funny.
Iconic. What a loophole.
Oh, I know. You have so many emails about these things ahead of you, Courtney. In your near future. You could get a Springsteen because now I think they straightened it all out. You'll know who to ask.
My epigraph is funny. I'm curious to see if my publisher is going to let me keep it. It's not Springsteen, but it is another New Jersey musician. So we'll see.
Oh, okay. After the Zoom, I'm gonna take a guess.
Okay. All right. We have a couple more like Jersey centric ones before we kind of like get more into like book specific, non-spoilery, but like book specific questions. So I have a fill in the blank, and it's I'm not sure how frequently you come back to New Jersey. I met you at a book event that you did in Spring Lake, so I know that you at least were back this past year for that.
Yeah.
Um,
My mom is
so
still there. We try to go back for like a month in the summer. So I try to go back for like several weeks, and then the winter kind of the winter and then the rest of the year kind of like depends.
yeah,
Try to do a nice long.
a vibe based decision. No, I love that. I'm curious. I'm curious to know what your trip. So my fill in the blank is no trip to New Jersey is complete without blank.
Oh, well, my trip to New Jersey, Sawmill Pizza. That's the one. We went there one time. Like, I think this describes the like what people will do for Sawmill Pizza. And I think everybody in this Zoom has their own, which is the pizza they would fill in for that. But like the Sawmill was the bar, right? It's right up my street. Like you have to make a run for it across this really crazy S curve. But it's 3 blocks from my house. It's where I had my first legal beer. I fictionalized it, but it is the model. It's the model for that main bar in the book. And it's the humongous piece, right? Like it's the huge one. It saved me from more hangovers than I can count. But we went up there, like it was like at 10 o'clock, but it was like a rainy weeknight. So they were trying to close. And this man comes and bangs on the door. And he's like, I drove 3 hours. I drove 3 hours for a Sawmill place. And I was like, sir, it is a rainy Wednesday. I feel like you should have had some kind of backup plan. But I also was like, please give this man a slice. Well, I was a little afraid of this man to begin with, because he like, I don't really know what he's going to do if they said no. But like the sentiment and the emotion, I was like, I feel that. I felt that. It's the first place I want to go. They've classed it up quite a bit too, but when I was growing up, it was the like teeny tiny free soda.
Oh, nice.
That came in like it was RC Cola, like the off-brand Coke, and a teeny tiny cup of it. That's it. That's number one, no question, no trip. I would cry and go back and feel very emotional if I went to that state and did not get Sawmill Pizza.
This is a great answer. I've never been, but I'm like the giant like Jersey Shore slice is speaking to me.
Yeah, we
I
have
to try.
someone in the chat agrees about both the giant slice and
slice larger than your face.
It is, and I love it's fun. It's another thing I kind of see differently when I was growing up there, and like tourists would come and be like, "What's this? Look at this funny pizza." I'd be like, but now I bring people there on purpose, and I'm like, look, this is the giant.
Love it.
Our first Iowan friends came to Jersey ever over the summer, brought their kids, and they totally got it. Like, yes, totally got it. They ate boardwalk food every night, and I was very happy. I would have it no other way.
Isn't it great when they just get it?
Yeah.
I just worry about people not getting it, and I hate when that happens.
Yeah. There's some shore characters who don't get. So shore characters who bring their dumb friends who don't get it.
Correct. I have a question actually for you and for Kerri, because I'm curious to know both answers. But Katie, we can start with you. If you could have dinner with any New Jersey icon, fictional or real, who would it be, and where would you take them to eat?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Fictional or real too, huh? Any Jersey icon. Okay, I think I'm gonna stay with music. And I'm gonna go, okay. Can I bring 2?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm gonna say sure.
Let's bring Jack Antonoff from Bleachers and Whitney Houston. And to eat, let's get Sawmill.
Okay, I was hoping that you were gonna bring Sawmill back for this. Okay.
You know, they have like penne vodka and stuff too. They have a very beautiful,
it's elegant.
Yeah, like we'll get like pizza to start, and then and then we'll get some of their other dishes.
A smorgasbord. Love it.
Go dance.
Kerri, I'm dying to know yours as well.
You're gonna have to answer after me as well because that's not fair. I don't know. That's hard. I feel pressured to have a really good answer, but I feel like I'd pick something weird, like someone from history that is obscure and like not that famous. Like for example, when I was a teenager, my first job was at historic Longstreet Farm in Homedale, New Jersey, which is now it's a living history farm that interprets the 1890s and has a house there. And one thing that I was always interested in when I was working there was that during the time period that we were portraying, the farm was actually owned by a woman. Her name was Mary Ann Longstreet, which was unusual for the time, but it just like there were the family that didn't have children, so it just sort of ended up with her as being the owner of this farm. And she like ran it with her nephew, who was much younger than her, obviously, because she was sort of older by the time she was the owner. But at any rate, I was always very interested to hear like what that was like, because we were telling her story through the museum, and I was just always kind of interested to hear like this was not a common thing that was going on. Like women weren't really doing this. So like I would just be interested to hear her story. As far as food, she would probably have no idea what a lot of things were because food has changed a lot since the 1890s. So I would probably take her for something really weird, like I don't know, like some fancy donut place or something. So just to see someone's reaction to that and be like, what is happening here?
I love that.
Love
I went on a field trip there one time, Kerri.
Really?
I actually remember I poured like corn kernels into something that like ground them up. It was gonna be my future, moving to a state known only for corn.
That's so funny. Yeah, there's a lot of corn there for sure. Did they have you milk the cows? That's another field trip staple there, I think.
Courtney, do you have one?
I do, but I feel like it's not nearly as thoughtful as either of yours. I would pick Tony Soprano, and I would bring him to Holston's, and I would say, what the fuck is going on here? I would like look around and be like, all right, who's here? Like, what is actually happening? So,
oh my gosh,
that's fine.
That's a great answer.
And Holston's is great, so
Since this is a safe space, I've never been to Holston's. I was supposed to go a couple of weeks ago and I ended up not being able to. So I hope it's in my near future.
Well, I live very close to there and go there all the time, so I'll take you.
Okay, wonderful. Perfect. Okay, shall we pivot to some more book centric questions?
I think that's okay. A good idea.
Do you want me to kick off, Kerri?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, so all right, specific to the shore. So this book has a multi-POV narration, right? There's 3 different perspectives going on. We have Liz, we have is it Evie or Evie?
Evie. Yeah.
It is Evie. Okay.
Me that probably that spelling could be either, but I always call her Evie.
I read it as Evie, but sometimes, I'm like making up my own pronunciations the entire book. Who are teenage sisters, and Margot, who is their mother. So the story is told from a sort of blend of each of their perspectives. And that multi-POV narration here feels so masterfully done, like in a way that I feel like is really difficult to do and you don't see very often. But I felt very equally invested in each of these 3 characters as we were swapping out perspectives, and like I never felt like I was speeding through anyone's to get to the next. Like I just so enjoyed being with each of them. And I was wondering, was this novel always going to be told from Liz, Evie, and Margot's perspective? What made you decide to do multi-POV? And I'm curious to know if you have a favorite character to write, whose life you most enjoyed embodying. Yeah.
That is such a great question. Yes, the original version of this, which I queried for, if you're not sending your heart to the universe, don't know what that is. That's when you write a book, you try to find an agent. It's called querying. You send this email that's just like a 1-page email, and then just your life's work out into the world. So I queried a version of this that was 1 17-year-old narrator, just Liz, with then just like a bunch of other stuff thrown in. And then I got close a couple times with that, but and then I took that to this workshop called Tin House in Portland, Oregon for a week. It was like my first time away. I had really little kids, and I was like, all right, this is my ticket in, then I'm throwing this in the trash. Came back from that and from the feedback there, I really wanted to add the family story. I was like on that plane back from Portland, I was like, damn it.
Can I ask what year you went to Tin House?
Yeah, it was a summer of 2019. And yeah, that summer session. Okay. Yes. Or have you also been to Tin House?
I was 2016. Yeah.
Oh, I missed you by a couple of years. And it lives up to all the hype. If there's any writers here who are like, oh, I am like the biggest hype woman for that one. I think particularly because, and I think this is like, it's the most I did not find it pretentious. That I hadn't been to anything in a long time. And I was like, I'm older. It's going to be like, all way younger people. And it wasn't that at all. It was very welcoming. And I found it very unpretentious, like just get down to work. So came back from that. And I was just like, oh no, I do have to rewrite this. And then I finished. And then that's when I decided to add the rest of the family. I threw in some other characters too, who ended up not making it to the final draft, but it just was really clear that it was their story. Like it was super clear that it was not just the 17-year-old story. It was a family story. And all those books I mentioned at the beginning of the Zoom, I think did that in their own way. They're not all multi-point of view, but they made it the entire family story in a way that any story about someone who's not themselves is the whole family's story. It just is such a complicated and hard thing for any family to deal with that of course it's everybody's story. And it became so much more interesting to show how it affected everybody. And I 100% have a favorite. And I don't think it's like children. They're made up people, so they're not going to come find me. Evie is just 100% my favorite. I'd like to think of her as having a bravery and a brazenness and that I did not ever come near to having. I was the older sister, you know what I mean? Tried to do everything right. And she just is fearless and sees the world in this totally. She's also growing up in a different time, right? She's growing up 20 years after me. And so she's growing up in a different time and place. And she's just the most fun. And she also has this older sister, who paves the way for her, protects her. So she was my favorite to write. She's my favorite character forever. And then I forgot. Yeah. So I think that was the 3. I think I answered everything. I think I did.
Oh, you're keeping very good track of me compounding questions on top of questions. So I appreciate that.
With multi-part questions, I can get a little chatty.
That's great though. That's what we want.
We appreciate it.
I'm going to steal one of your questions, Courtney, because I'm looking at them as well. I love this question. If there's a favorite detail of yours about a character or Seaside or New Jersey in general that you sort of included in the book, kind of just for you, I think that's a good question.
Oh, that is a really good question. It's a little more it's funny. It's not like an Easter eggy kind of thing, nothing Easter eggy is coming to me right away. I'm sure I'll think of one in a second, but Liz is running, the older sister, and her running is one of the most autobiographical details. I was a runner in high school and growing up, and particularly she stops, right? She when she probably would need it the most and need it to kind of help her through some stuff the most, she makes a point to be it's kind of notice me, help me, right? I'm a teenager abruptly quitting this thing that has been super important in my life. And every kid I know, every teenager I know, has done something like that when they're going through something really hard, right? And people notice it or they don't. And like, I feel like no one like noticed it for her. Like nobody, like, I feel like, she, you know, she was like making this big stand and like very abruptly stopping this thing that was super important to her. And her family was like, yeah, we're busy. Okay. So you don't run anymore. Like, and then, you know, and then I don't think it's a spoiler to say she takes it up again. Like, oh no, you know, she does take it up again and like owns it a little bit, and it changes what it is to her. So anyway, it's not so much like little tiny, like, you know, I threw in this like particular cotton candy stand kind of thing. But it is probably like the most personal, like probably one of the most personal like details that was, you know, really important.
I love that.
I love that too.
I'm looking for, I mean, like, and Caroline Klein, we've got some, I feel like we're going to see some echoes. Okay.
Can I tell you that like the title itself is a Summer Sisters reference. I gave her the same last name as Gus. Like,
oh,
yeah.
see, so that's your answer to that question.
Summer Sisters infiltrates every part of my life. I have a couple of questions about the sort of technology aspects of the novel. You do this really great job of intersecting technology and communication in a way that ends up playing a very pivotal role in the book. And even though Margot is one of the POV characters, so like we're following her for, you know, a third of the book, we're close to her. We really end up getting this like deeper level of insight through her online communications. And some of them are present day. We have this GBM's wives support group that she's a part of, where other wives in that group are suffering, their husbands are suffering with the same brain cancer that her husband has. And then some of them are emails from 1998 during her courtship with Brian, her husband. And I was curious, were the online communications always going to be part of the book from its inception? And I mean, like, I have to imagine other readers feel similarly. Like reading those emails in particular just made me really wistful and like made me wish that I did a better job of keeping record of my college emails. So I was wondering, like, are you super diligent about saving your own digital interactions?
Well, probably more so now, but effortlessly, because technology is different now, right? Like your Gmail, I have a Yahoo account from that, like, you know, got spam. It was spamming everybody in 2012, and just you're just like, it's gone. So anything I sent anybody from that account, like besides what I real quick, like, you know, saved, is gone, right? Like, so a little bit better now, just like, but not because I'm better at it. I think because like social media has kind of a vested interest in like saving your memories and like, you know, monetizing them and keeping you there, right? So I am, but it's not really like up to me. And they were always there, even in that early version that was only a 17-year-old. Those are the things I was like, but also we know her mom's emails, and also we have this online forum that we can just see. And they were there even before the whole family was there. And I absolutely love storytelling in this form with these like artifacts and these like little daily communications. I think you can find out so much about a character, and particularly in the emails. There's so much space between them in the 90s, that in that stage of the 90s, right? Like you would not expect to hear back in 10 minutes from an email. Like it could be weeks or months. Like you might not check it, you know, or you might not have access, or you might be, especially at that stage of Brian and Margot's life, they could be home with their parents' dial-up, that, you know, and not really have access to it. So there's a lot of space in between that I really trust the reader to imagine and fill in. You know, and like in relation to what that time would have been, right? Like they will reference times that they saw each other and times that they communicated other ways between these emails. So yeah, they were always there. And one interesting thing about like this late 90s, mid to late 90s form of communication is like, no one really remembers, right? Like, so actually, like when I was doing this, I emailed, like the computer science department at Rutgers, because Brian, supposedly that's where he's supposed to go to college, right? And Margot goes to a fictional Midwest college. And the computer science department could not like tell me definitively like when like email communication was like regular among students there. They were like, we think it's now, but we're not really sure. And it was the nature of that kind of communication. Another interesting aspect of like emails from the late 90s is that like you would have never imagined that they would like be read by somebody else, right? Like you would have never imagined that they would have been like found, though they did keep them. So ostensibly maybe Margot and Brian themselves would have like wanted to see them and revisit them. But there's a bit of an invasive nature to the girls finding those that like is very specific to that time period and that kind of communication. And I have yet to find, no, I think like in talking about this book, I've only found very, very few people who kept communication, like electronic communication of any kind from that era. It's a thing that like so many people wish they had. I really wish I did. I like vividly remember though, I had a college email, then you got an email like 2 weeks after graduation. They're like, well, this is all going to go away, so make sure you save. And no one saved anything because it was 2 weeks after college ended. You were busy.
One day the password just stopped working. Like that's how it was for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to go back. And I'm like, my love letters.
Yes, it's just like totally ephemeral. And it never occurred to me. To like, oh, take a few minutes, go through and like copy and paste all this, like, because you might want it. Like it never even crossed my mind, not to mention instant messages. I would like, I don't know what I would give to be able to access those from that era. So it's really interesting and a real lost ephemeral kind of communication. There's this little sort of hole in people's records of their communication from things they sent like in that manner in that time in history.
It makes me very, I don't know, it makes me very like nostalgic and sad to think about.
You know what though? You might not have the emails, themselves, but you remember the feeling. Like your on again, off again boyfriend sending you one line in an email that you hadn't heard from him. You're like, you're just
studying
like,
abroad, smoking a French cigarette, waiting for that email to come in. Vibes. I know that's a universal feeling.
I mean,
I think maybe Kerri and I'll ask like one more question a piece, and then we can open it up and see if anybody else has some questions. Could not let you get off this call without asking you about my favorite passage in the book. I was pretty invested like off the bat. Like I got like pretty immediately drawn into this book, but I feel like the segment that like really sank its teeth into me was page 48, which is where Liz is trying to compose a text message, and Liz is the older of the two teenage daughters. She's trying to compose a text message to Gabe, who is her love interest. They had this this is the morning after they had this idyllic gin and lemon scented date. There's skee ball, there's a kiss, and she settles on hay. But then the next few pages are spent unfurling just kind of everything that's in her mind, like that comes after hay. And those pages just did such a beautiful job distilling down this electric sensation of, being young and in love on the Jersey Shore while still managing to like subvert cliche and finding this really unique, memorable rhythm. Like I felt like I thought about that passage for the rest of the summer. So any insight on how this scene came to be? Like if there was, inspiration for the moment, thoughts behind its composition, and if you have a favorite passage in the book or something you're really, proud of pulling off at some point in the book.
Well, thank you so much. Harry has a Harry in Spare repeats a hey. And I was like, did your ghostwriter maybe? But total side note. So what I have to say about that passage is, right, is like, it's the reason to read fiction instead of watch a movie, right? Like a passage like that, right? A moment that like visually or like in your real life, it passes in like a nanosecond, you know, and it's all up in your head, and you feel so much that you don't articulate to yourself, right? But it is all there. You are feeling it all, right? And I think that's the magic of reading fiction. Like the most magical thing about reading fiction is that you can, right? You can take this moment and you can write about it. You can write 3 pages that all start with hey, that like break your heart and just like give you a big kick and take you somewhere, right? Or you can write 100 pages on it if you want to. Like you can do 100 pages and you can go into the past and future, right? All your past and future selves. And like, it's truly like the magic, right? Like if you pictured like this as a movie scene, right? It'd be a great scene. It would be beautiful. She'd be thinking about it. But like, there's no way to do this in a movie that's not, that like gets you here, right? And like, and movies do things that books can't do, right? But that's like a reason to do it, you know? And I love to read that section out loud. It's the most fun because the end of it is like, it's what she really, you know, the end, like, well, in the middle to the end, the part that I always end on is where she says like, hey, maybe I'll keep that to myself. Maybe that will be the question I ask about anyone from now on. What have you already lost? And like, she's back and forth about what she really wants from this, like what she wants from this guy, what she wants from this night, you know, like what she's just like claiming for herself for this summer and this night and this guy. And she's like, F that, I'm not going to not have a 17-year-old summer because this really sad thing's happening to me. Right. So that is my, where I'm at with hey. And I think that's been in there since the beginning. And I think as a, like, if there's any writers here, it's a great little trick. And this happens to be a trick. It's a trick I use all the time. And then like 95% of the time I throw it out or just use one line from it right in the end. But like, if you're ever stuck or you just want to find out more about a character, just like start a line with the same thing over and over again and see what they say. Just see what they say.
I'm taking diligent notes.
Just see what they say, right? If you started with like, maybe I'll blah, 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 right? Like if only I'd blah, 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 right? And just keep going for 3 pages and see what they say. Like you'll probably throw it away, but you might really find something out about them.
I love that. Okay, so for my last question before we let attendees ask questions, speaking of writers, I was wondering if you have any advice just like on how you like wrote about your hometown in this way. And, you know, I already kind of asked why you wanted to, but just I'm curious if you like traveled there while you were working on it at all, or if you did a lot of it from a distance and kind of the pros and cons of each of, you know, being there and thinking about it or being away from it and thinking about it, and just kind of what you would, you know, encourage anyone who wants to write about a place that's special to them, like how you went about that.
Yeah, so I moved around so much, right? Like I started it when I was close. So I was in New York City. And so I could just come home on the bus, you know, and like any time of year. And it was easy when it very first started. But then I got farther away as the draft kept on going. And I would come home in the summers. And I definitely had some anxiety about like, you know, Jersey people are tough critics. You know, are they going to be like, you don't live here? So I think like the advice is to like, you know, as particularly in fiction, you know, like you can trust your memory, right? Like you can trust your memory and the vibes that you want to evoke, you know, and there's things that I fictionalized because I wanted to like combine vibes, right? Like I wanted to evoke, like I didn't want to evoke one. I actually particularly didn't want it to be the sawmill. I wanted it to be sawmill inspired. But it was intentional to fictionalize it, right? And same with like, they worked at a place called the Cranky Crab. There's probably 3 restaurants that could be the Cranky Crab. And I did that on purpose, right? Because I wanted to have my cake and eat it too a little bit, you know? So I would say, like, you know, you can write about your hometown and you can trust your memory, even if there's a particular, like, I think there's actually a particular magic, and there's a particular thing and like affection and love, that like I developed only because I was far away. Like I heard that Hurricane Sandy had happened when I was like driving home on the 405 from work in LA. And it was the most bizarre it was on NPR in LA. And I was like, what in the world? You know, like, so, you know, it was wild, you know, like, so I think you can trust your memory and you don't have to have that anxiety, you know? And I think there's a particular something to be gained from that, you know, that from that distance, you know, and that homesickness. Like, honestly, it was like homesickness for me too, you know, like I wanted to recreate like what it felt like to grow up there at a, you know, like when I grew up there.
That's great. Yeah, I think you were definitely successful at that. Yeah, so I'm gonna change it now so that people can unmute themselves, or you can type in the chat. But if anyone has a question for Katie, now is the time. And feel free to, I think this is a small enough group that you can just unmute and chime in. We don't have to raise hands or anything, I think.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for putting this together, Kerri and Courtney and Katie, for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. I'm also a writer who's querying, and hearing about your journey, recognizing what your book needed and having that moment on the plane of like, oh, what am I in for? Like making all these changes. I'd love to hear more about that courage of saying, this is working and this could make it even better. And then taking the leap to then query again, and just what you learned along that journey.
Oh, that's such a great question. And it's a bit of a cliche thing, but like the feeling on the plane was like, whatever happens with this, I have to see what happens with these people. I have to, like, if I throw it in the trash in June, I have to see what happens with these people, you know? And it's interesting because I don't have, like, I'm not a writer who has like 5 novels, you know. I'm jealous of people who do, right? Like but I feel like I wrote 3 novels in a way, you know, like they were so different and they were such overhauls that it felt like it was like 3 different projects, right? So yeah, I think if the question is like, you know, how do I know, right? You have a project, right? And you're like, how do I know if I'm done or if it needs an overhaul, right? It's going to sound a little bit woo-woo, but like, it like I would say seek out something outside yourself, right? Like whether it's a workshop or another reader, or anything outside yourself, right? Or it could be anything, like you don't have to pay for it, right? It could be a series of podcasts. It could be anything, like, particularly there's one called The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, that like, if you're looking for something to like shake it up and like wonder, should I keep going? Right. It's amazing. I love, and they read query letters on that show. And so anyway, so like whatever it is, you seek outside your perspective, and then come back, right? And if there's any little tiny like shred of a voice that's like, I really just want to see what happens, then you see what happens, right? Then I think that's the answer to that, right? The like, is it done? Does it need another version? The other thing that I had going for me, like coming home from that workshop, is like I met literally one agent. I like, my MFA was this place called Warren Wilson College. It's like a low residency in the woods of North Carolina. Very not like agent wine and cheese kind of MFA. So I didn't have anything like that, but I met one at this one workshop. And like, I was so nervous. I did a horrible pitch to her where I just talked the whole time and was very nervous and upspeaky and felt terrible after. But at the end, I was like, can I email you? And she said, yeah, sure. And so knowing that I had this one person that I could email, that it would not be like totally cold or wouldn't be like a repeat, I was like, well, I'm going to send it to this person. and her name was Samantha Shea, and she's not my agent. She's a very nice person. She's not my agent, but like, I knew that like, but I knew she was like there at the end, you know? So like I don't know what that says about like, I think I would have rewritten it no matter if she was there at the end or not. But if you have that, so if you have that, any shred of that, like intrinsic, I want to see what happens, then see what happens, right? So that we could have several Zooms on this.
Thank you so much.
Any other audience questions? You can put in the chat too if you don't feel like saying that loud.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
We've connected over Instagram. And
Yeah.
your book just was such an inspiring book for me because one of my mom's really good friends that was kind of my surrogate grandma also had brain cancer. And so that just struck a chord with me. So what I've just always wondered, is there someone in your life that had that? Because you wrote it so eloquently and so thoughtfully for that disease that I just really loved it because it made it not such a tragic thing, I guess. It was just a beautifully written piece.
Thank you so much. And I just can't tell you, my heart, like whenever you hear that it like reached somebody who's been through this exact thing, it's like my heart just explodes, you know, like it's also a cliche thing, but you're just like, I want to just like hand you all the things, you know, like it's the thing I needed, right? Like there's a lot of books about people who are not themselves. There are not hundreds of books in every bookstore about this very specific way of not being yourself. So yeah, my dad, when I was growing up, did have this exact same GBM. And it affected him in this very similar way. There's actually, it doesn't always do this. And I don't know if with your family friend, if this was the case, but depending where it is, it can be more in your speech or your motor skills and other things than your personality. But for my dad, it was in this like social emotional place in his brain. And it really did just change his personality, not his memory, like dementia does, right? Like,
Yeah.
but the like impulsivity, kind of like wanting to do stuff now, very, like almost like all those ways, like that sort of like all the ways that the girls describe it. And the thing that was different was the ages though. So I was in college, so I was like 19, 20, 21. And then he passed away the spring after I graduated from college. So the girls in the book are younger. But compared with the books I was mentioning earlier, I really wanted it to be this exact teenage time for them. Because I think this kind of caregiving is so different from other kinds. You're out in the world, you're going to the store, you're in the car, you're out for a ride, it's not a like medical kind of caregiving, like other illnesses might be, but it's a very particular kind. So we did experience it. I do have one sister and my mom, but I changed the ages of the girls. So they were closer together so they could sort of have each other as contemporaries a little bit closer together. And because I think it would have been a very different story if one daughter was like away at college and one was home. I wanted them all under the same roof, so I'm so sorry that you've been through that, but so glad that the book connected with you in that way. It just means the world when you find somebody who has been through, it's very, very specific,
It really was. And I think that I told you when I wrote my review of your book on my Instagram, I was like, it was the book of last year. I mean, I read tons of books and yours I felt like I was back in my teenage years, partly because of that. And then also I just could not put it down. Like I was almost like under my blanket, like with my flashlight reading. And that's such a special feeling as a reader. So thank you for putting your work out to us. It's really great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi, Katie. I am curious, knowing that your experience with this disease happened when you were a young woman, what it was like to kind of re-examine the experience from Margot's perspective as the mother, considering that at the time you were writing the book, you were a mother yourself.
Oh, that's a great question. I know Laura's from Iowa City. Hi, Laura. Yeah, it's I don't think I could have written this version of it before I was a mom myself. Like, I think there are very talented writers who can do that, and I don't think I'm one of them. And I always say that I'm all three of them, right? Like, I'm all three of them, the aspect of the mother that was most on my mind, like, constantly, right? And when every decision, she screws up so many decisions. She does not do a great job. But her intentions are always to protect her kids. Like, that's what she's trying to do. And she fails. Like, not talking about stuff, right, is not protecting them. And so, but I get that impulse, like, my kids are littler, but every once in a while they will, like, wallop you with a real big kid question, and my impulse is sometimes to, like, evade it or tell a little white lie or say something that was, like, exactly what my mom would have said. And she said a lot of great things, and she said a lot of things that were, like, not perfect, like every parent in the world. And so that was her intention. But particularly the part about, like, yes, trying to protect them, trying to, like, wishing something else for them. And so trying to make it true with, like, a shortcut, I think is also something that I wrote as a mom. So shout out to Margot. It's funny. One podcast I did is Convinced. It's a great podcast. It's called, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. Oh my goodness, I'll put it in the chat or send it after. They're two Jersey guys, and I'm, like, forgetting the name of it. They're convinced that this family, like, has it out, like a sort of, like, Fleabag style. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that show. There's a lot of having it out, like, a lot of families having it out in Fleabag, and they are convinced that there's a future, like, they were convinced it's Thanksgiving, that everybody loses it. They might be right. I think I think sometime in the future they get through the hard thing. But it's something they're going to be dealing with forever, right? So anyway, yeah, I love Margot. I hope she's doing okay. She is doing okay, actually, by the way. I hope I gave you enough little flash forwards so that they're okay. Like, I'm not going to tell you everything that happens to them in the future, but that they're okay. Anyone else from general Zoom group? It's okay if you don't. They covered a lot. Kerri and Courtney, you guys covered a lot today.
We could go forever. Always got a lot of questions. But if there's no more, we can wind down.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
been about an hour, I think, since we started too. So we were within the time that we estimated.
Oh yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic group. Anything like Courtney or Kerri, I love to hear a good book rec to finish. Anything that you've been reading or listening to that you love. Like, you mentioned some things when you started the Zoom. This is definitely a group that will go add to their TBR. What are we leaving them with for other suggestions?
Oh, what did I just read? I've just opened my spreadsheet of my books because I can never remember.
I have one more Jersey book to recommend. Hiadasa's Second Act. This came out, like, also kind of around when my book came out. It's actually set in Homedale.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
I've never heard of this. I have to check it out.
It's also a family story, and it's also it's a family that's, like, kind of reverberations of grief, like, years later. Multi POV, multi-generational, and I loved it. I think that particularly a group who liked the shore would love it. Nice. I think paperback. I'm not sure the exact paperback date. It's still in hardcover now. But that's one it's not a recent read, but it's if you like the shore, you might like read.
Cool.
I'm putting that on my list.
Yeah.
Homedale is such an interesting
I know.
place to set a novel.
I'm 90% sure it's Homedale. Yeah, I'm 90% sure. That might be where the author's originally from, and it's somewhere nearby. But But he's a Jersey guy. He's like, I think he writes sports for the New York Times. Is his like main job. Isn't that funny? I know.
Aspirational.
Maybe
I'm
that'll be
reading-
a future pick. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd be fantastic. I'm coming to that one.
Want by Lynn Stager Strong, which like now that I'm thinking about it, does kind of have some similar vibe. So killing two birds
she's
with
a
one
mother.
stone.
That's a beautiful book. She's a mother. She's a runner. That character runs in some god awful conditions, though. She's always running on ice. I'm very nervous for her.
Yes, exactly. But it's great. It's a slim tome. She's just so talented. I think that I'd read anything that she's written. But I'm always a slow reader, but I'm particularly slow lately, and so I feel very accomplished that I'm like almost done with that book. But yeah, it's 3 siblings, 3 adult siblings, their spouses. They are gathering for their first Christmas without their mother, who passed away like a few months prior to when the book takes place, and they're all sort of grappling with that, and also kind of engaging with this local family who's having a hard time, and their Christmases kind of get intertwined. It's a very quiet, beautiful novel. Highly recommend.
You're reading Flight, not Want.
Did I say Want?
Yeah, Want is her other one. I haven't read Flight. That's the synopsis of it. So
I'm reading Flight, but I love Want.
You're an editing brain, so I'm impressed. You know your own name.
Also, one of the characters in Flight is like constantly running on ice and like slips.
Oh, interesting. This is the connect. I think
there's a motif.
Yes.
Both novels.
That too.
Want and Flight, phenomenal. Highly rec.
I love a put a family in a house and see what happens story. Love this.
I just finished a couple months ago. I just finished The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan, which has been very popular. So I'm sure a lot of people either know it or it's on their list already, but it is very good. It's not uplifting, so you have to bear that in mind.
Yeah. One of the ways I would sell that book is like it's dark, but it's fast.
Yeah.
So like the darkness doesn't you don't have to you don't feel like you're stuck in the darkness, because I describe that book as like propulsive. I flew through it. Yes. Very dark, but like in a fly through, can't put it down way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, I'm always in the middle of like 4 books at any given time. So
same. I'm sure many people in this group feel the same way. Well, I so appreciate you choosing the shore for your book club. This has been fantastic and so much fun to meet Jersey Collective folks and readers.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and thank you everyone for coming to our first meeting of Jersey Collective Reads. And we will, if you are not already on the email list, I'm assuming most of you are because you're here, but if you happen to see this on Instagram, I'm just going to drop it in the chat. If you join our newsletter, that's how you can find out about the future meetings and the next pick for next month. We're probably going to try and alternate like books with articles just to keep it not as much of a commitment and to kind of change it up a bit. So if anyone has any suggestions for anything, also feel free to DM us or email us.
Oh, actually, this could be a great, like if you're doing like a podcast or article, I remember the podcast. It's How to Win the Lottery.
Okay.
A Zoom brain moment. It's fantastic. 2 Jersey guys, they read a book, talk to the author, and it's fantastic. You can add it to the long list of beautiful things coming out of New Jersey.
Sounds good. Yeah,
I've never heard of this one.
Yeah, I have to look that up. I listen to a lot of podcasts because I have a commute, so that's
yeah. Well, thank you again, and yes, I'll see you soon as a guest. I'll be back. I'll be back as a Zoom guest too.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for joining us and for all your thoughtful answers.
And to both of you too. Thank you again. All right, take care, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, again. And we'll see you next time, I hope. We'll have a recap of this with the recording if anyone wants to watch it again. um, and we'll let you know what's in the works for next time soon.